Hello and welcome to The Pledge. It was the Oscars this week. A group of famous faces coming together, battling to get in front of the cameras and taking it in turn to trumpet their political views. If that's the sort of telly that keeps you watching and you're gutted it's all over for another year, fear not. The Pledge is here to keep you going.
There we go.
Coming up on this week's programme, we'll be marking International Women's Day. With that in mind, Carol starts her own Time's Up campaign. June says it's time to ditch the battle of the sexes. Nick wants the government to stop ruining all his fun. And Greg thinks we need a radical rethink on how to tackle inequality. But first, it's me. Women, like men, only cheaper. Don't laugh. That's a meme going round since the news that almost 5 decades after the Equal Pay Act, women are still paid on average 18% less than the chaps. In the city, the average pay gap is 60%, with estimates suggesting men get paid twice as much as women at some investment banks. Even in Westminster, female MPs get less too. By the start of April, companies with more than 250 staff have to report their gaps in pay and bonuses. The results so far are predictably predictable. It's the same old story. So far, Britain's bosses haven't been minding the gap, they've been ignoring the law. But is this a failure of the market or of society? Whoever's to blame, something must be done.
Rachel, here. I completely agree with everything you said there. The issue is, I don't think an audit goes far enough. I think we actually need legislation. I think there needs to be some sort of levy. I think companies that break or aren't transparent should be penalised. I think we've got to hit them in their wallets. That's the only thing that companies understand. And actually, all of the research and data shows that when you pay women what they are worth, it's better for society, it's better for GDP. I mean, there was a great report by McKinsey which said that they could actually add an extra $28 trillion to global GDP if women were paid at the same rates as men.
And I can't remember how big the actual figure of the gender pay gap deficit is, but it's in the billions.
Billions.
Nick, today, actually, a Labour MP suggested that they should fine companies for lack of transparency, and many of the companies that should have reported have not yet.
That Labour MP is, of course, Dawn Butler, who was on my radio show this morning. She is the Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities. I think most of the time, you're banging on an open door. Everybody would agree. You mentioned banking also. I won't name the companies because they're not here to defend them, but some of the companies involved in the tourism industry, ridiculous, 2.5 times more if you are a bloke than you get a woman. So that's wholly wrong. A couple of things occur to me. I thought there was legislation that made this illegal, sort of 10 years ago. Everybody had...
Tons of it.
Clearly they've...
Well, as I said, ignoring the law.
So they're doing that. Yeah. In Iceland, the company gets fined a set amount each day. So they do the audit, and if you don't act on it, you're fined an equivalent of £350 per day for every day you go and breach, which I reckon. The only thing is that in some industries, let's just say that we're all air stewards or air stewardesses or whatever we are, I get it. In an industry such as the one in which I've grown up, and indeed Greg used to run, and the BBC have got itself in all sorts of problems, that is what worries me, because in some industries you must pay by ability, not just by gender.
No,
so let's not lose that.
There's an apples and pears context to this whole debate, which I think we all understand, but I think that it still goes beyond that, doesn't it, Carol? Even though we've got a British Prime Minister, you know, British head of... female head of state, female everything.
I mean, a couple of things occurred to me as well. There was a report about pay in Parliament this week, which I thought was quite misleading, actually, because it said that men get paid on average 10.4% more than women, which they do. But when you look that more closely, the killer line in that survey was that despite the fact they all have the same basic salary, the gap comes because some men have other jobs as well.
Yeah, that's an earnings-related point. So even if our legislators are getting underpaid...
But the point of that is that women... This is because men have more than one job. Of course. And women...
Because they can.
More of
because
the
they
men.
can.
Because they can.
More
but
of
women,
the men.
women can...
Disproportionately Tory men. If you actually look at
the
figures, the Labour Party is
because they work hard.
Yes,
let's be honest with that.
How many Labour MPs would you want on your board anyway?
Oh my goodness!
Quite right too.
Let you finish your point, because I've got a special delivery for the panel after you make your point. So make it a quick one.
I was going to say there are some industries where women actually earn very much more in parts of Tesco.
Not many. industry.
In Tesco, great.
No, wait a minute.
They got that to look forward to.
We've got to talk about low-paid women because they're the ones that really bother me. People in the city on 5, 6, 7-figure salaries and bonuses, they can fight their own battles. So there are some areas where companies are actually getting it together. I mean, that could
But that's the minority.
But
Right, panel. I think we're going to have a special delivery which actually really graphically explains the pay.
Hello.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Greg. You all right there? There you go. All right.
Oh.
Is that for you, Mr. Nick? There
Thank you
go.
very
All
much
right.
indeed. Postman
Lovely.
Pat there.
Yeah, these are
Very secure.
paychecks. This is a paycheck. Well, there's none for me. I'm all right.
Typical of Sky, isn't it?
Right.
Okay, guys,
see,
do you know what
yeah.
that explains?
Yes. We're working for
Someone
free.
forgot to put something in the envelope.
Women effectively work for free 2 whole months of the year. Up to now, we've been working for free, and you boys have been being paid.
Yes.
That is basically what the 18% pay gap between the sexes amounts to.
Yeah.
So that's
we
your
do-
payday, and we get paid going
We do
forward.
work
The drinks are on you two.
I thought we did. I thought we did this for love.
Yes.
Doesn't that
don't
bring
quite
it
know the
home to
point.
you?
Greg, you don't need that
Greg,
original.
Yes.
let
You
me
don't need
explain
that.
the
Yes,
point.
the
Because
point-
of the 18%
Yeah.
pay gap deficit between men and women, we effectively work for free up to today.
Yeah.
Rachel, no one disagrees. I don't think anyone disagrees. And we've made the points, and quite rightly you've made your points, and I've pointed out that in some instances you pay by ability. You can't just pay
Yes.
because you're...
But do you agree with legislation? Do you
Absolutely.
think we need to
I
act
want to...
to
we have
close it?
legislation.
But I mean, legislation that's actually fit for purpose.
Yeah, no, but isn't part of the problem? There are still jobs that are seen as women's jobs, and they tend to get paid less.
Less, for
than
sure, yeah.
men jobs. I mean, you had this very interesting case in Birmingham City Council, didn't you? Where
Yes.
actually they demonstrated that the woman's job was as valid as the man's job, and therefore, and it's almost bankrupted the council.
You
Why,
have
what?
the same...
Explain it a bit more.
Well,
Greg.
because they went to a tribunal, the union took them to a tribunal, and the tribunal decided that women, that job that was largely done by women, was worth as much money as that job that was largely done by men, and they backdated what they were owed
So
for several years.
let me bring in a grab here. This is Fiona Haythorne, who's MD of Women on Boards in the UK.
I personally don't believe they're breaking the law with regard to paying people to do the same job but paying them different amounts of money. It's largely because women in general have tended to be recruited to the back office rather than the front office, and the front office tends to be where the higher paid trading opportunities are. So what you are finding is the investment banks are working hard to make sure, I hope in future, that they're going to be doing better talent management, they're going to be looking at how they recruit women and also how they promote women within.
I mean, that's kind of what you were saying. I mean, I have to say, you know, when you read about some of the salaries that people get in the city, I don't suppose many people on a council estate in Hull are going to be too bothered about that, the fact they're on 6 or 7-figure salaries. But it's kind of what you're saying. Women get taken on for jobs that aren't as high profile.
But
One thing we've
also...
not- Sorry, Jude, sorry.
No, but just to say, but also one of the real problems is the fact that there aren't enough women in positions of leadership to actually bring... No. In terms of the FTSE, there are only 7 female FTSE CEOs. There are 17 men just called John.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
There's
come
there's an
on.
interesting figure that if you look, that only 3% of CEOs in the world's largest companies are women.
There you
The
go.
world's 500
See,
companies.
the one thing no one has discussed...
What?
John and Joanna are not the same in many instances because they're not going to have the same level of experience, because highly likely that Joanna would have had some time to go and have a family, which is wonderful.
Oh, but
and they... So, hold on, if you then take 2 years out or whatever...
And John
you
didn't
don't have
take
the
his
same...
statutory paternity leave
No,
because he decided that
Nick,
she was going to step off
that's
the
the
career track and
reality.
he was going to...
My eldest daughter lives in Sweden. In Sweden, and she's just about to have her second child. She's going to take 6 months, and then her husband takes 6 months. It's automatic.
How much paternity leave did you take, Nick?
The afternoon.
Yes, men don't take paternity leave.
Yes.
No,
And we
and
need
they shouldn't. They should
to
get
address
back
that.
to work to
And
earn
also,
the money
and
to pay for the baby.
What we need to address is the fact the Fawcett Society produced some figures that said that the real problem area
Is
with
equal
women
value.
is it's in with Bangladeshi and Pakistani women who earn 26% less
Yes.
than guys,
Yes.
and also Black African women
Yes.
24%
Yes.
less
Yeah.
than guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I
shocking.
mean, it is International Women's Day, but let's focus on Britain. And in this country, one of the newspapers started a campaign today which basically said that women who want to start businesses get 10%
Yes.
of the funding that men who want to
Well,
start businesses
I
do.
co-signed
So the
that
idea that
letter
we
in the
can
Telegraph, so, yeah.
seed the corporate culture with more women is actually is strangled at birth by the fact that banks aren't giving women
Women
money to start their own
their
businesses.
Well, That was good.
It's good.
Sorry that. OK, so my turn now. I want to talk about the oh-so-boring Oscars, the 90th Academy Awards that racked up the lowest ratings in the ceremony's history. And why was that? Because people are sick of being preached at by a bunch of posturing, hypocritical lovies, virtue signalling and ramming their politics down our throats. People have had it up to here with rich, privileged celebs lecturing the rest of us on our carbon footprint while flying around the world in private jets or droning on about Trump's wall while living in gated mansions. Yeah. And then there's the Time's Up Me Too Brigade, who used the 3 hours, 48 tedious minutes of the Oscars and every other award ceremonies this year to score political points. These women really see themselves as radicals changing the world while protesting in dresses that cost an average person's annual salary. It isn't always wrong for celebrities to use their fame to promote a cause, but these self-righteous political speeches have to stop. And if that means banning them, so be it. Yeah. The journalist Ella Whelan said this week that, quote, feminism is merely the latest must-have accessory. Well, it's time they put the accessory away, stopped with all the political speeches, and did what they do best, act. Yeah.
Oh, Carol, you've spent most of your life, as I understand it, as a journalist on popular newspapers.
Yeah.
Popular newspapers survive by these sort of quotes from people from stars, from people who are around. That's what they survive on. That's what they're about.
Not political statements from stars.
Not political, but it's about taking notice of these people when probably you shouldn't take any notice of them.
But I just want you to have a look at this clip to just show you how up themselves they are.
I think we have a responsibility to speak up and talk about social injustice and change, and we have the platform to do it, certainly, because we are in the entertainment industry.
I think this performance was extremely special because we got to honor, amazing heroes like Nicole Hockley here and the work that they're doing, fighting against gun violence and feeding people in Puerto Rico, you know what I mean, fighting for equal justice. And so for us today, that was the real honor.
OK, the first person was actress Allison Janney. Why, in God's name, does she think that because she's in the entertainment... No, hang on. Why she's in the entertainment industry, she has a responsibility to speak out about it. And Andrea Day, she says the honour was to honour somebody called Nick Hockley, who's fighting against gun violence and people starving in Puerto Rico. No, but hang on. No, her honour that night was to actually sing at the Oscars. Something? That was her honour. Yes, darling. And the reason I was pointing to you during the intro, not because of the dresses, because I could feel your eyes.
Yeah, I was like... Well, first of all, you are very vocal about your views against this sort of stuff.
Yes.
So why do you have more validity to express your views than them? At the end of the day, we live in a democracy. We live in a society that promotes freedom of speech.
They're actors.
No, but the point is...
You're a journalist.
Yes.
Precisely.
I'm a commentator. This is what I do.
And let me finish. And actually... Let's not forget, all of these celebrities, and not those two, but a lot of them I've worked with. Rachel, you've worked with a lot of them on campaigns. The fact is people listen to them. If somebody with 100 million Twitter followers or 150 million Instagram followers actually says... Not necessarily.
Well, the viewing figures this year will tell you that.
But I'm not talking about the Oscars. I'm talking about celebrities in general.
But June, I think the charity scandal means that they listen to them far less than they used to. Look, actors are the following. They don't even have the wit to... Someone else writes their words, someone else tells them where to stand, and someone else tells them to whom they should address their words. Do they have a right, though?
You're just both of you. And why do you have a right? You sit on the radio every day spouting out your views.
Do you know you've got a point? No, but hang on a second. Do you know she's right? I've worked my way up or down.
No, acting is their problem.
No, but that's...
One second, then, Greg, I will you. Do I agree with Carol? I can't actually agree. There is too much of it. There is too much of this use of these awards. But to sort of, and you and I don't like banning. I know that, and you don't like censoring. Should it be taken? Should they have a quiet word? Can we tone it down? Yes, but stop it altogether. I'd be rather nervous.
But it's the self-righteousness of them that gets me. I mean, I was listening to a bunch of them on stage the other day, and there was 3 of them on stage, and I'm not allowed to name who people were. But anyway, they said, our voices have carved a new path. No, their voices have not carved a new path. I'll tell you who carved the new path, June, looking at me with daggers. Yeah. The 13 unknown actresses who had everything to lose, who spoke to the New Yorker, they carved the path,
but
not the ones jumping on the bandwagon.
Actresses were able to amplify that message.
No, they jumped on a bandwagon because they saw
had they
saw
not,
they
it
were
wouldn't have
working
got
it.
the same attention. No way.
Can I have
Rachel?
I mean, I partly agree. I think these endless awards ceremonies that come around every 5 minutes are like Mogadon.
Sorry,
I mean,
you're the Journalist Awards, are you? You're nominated, aren't you?
Yes.
So you won't be attending that, love?
That's different.
I have slipped the judges to get you a nomination, Rachel. You better turn up.
I will not be making a long speech when I lose again. But I think that, Carol, you'd be equally disappointed if these celebrities did have a platform and actually failed to say something of any utility.
No,
or
I wouldn't be
use at all.
disappointed.
But I mean, we've got to give credit where it's due. And let me just mention one, Amal Clooney, who is married to George Clooney, who is using the fact that she's a beautiful barrister to try and get justice for the rape victims of the Yazidi genocide in the UN. Now, because she's Amal Clooney, she's getting a proper hearing. Some of the victims have actually given speeches that have reduced the entire UN General Assembly to tears. Are you saying she shouldn't use her platform?
She's entirely different. She's a barrister who works
yes, she is,
in
but a
human
lot
rights.
of them have other...
It's entirely different.
But you know, being married to George Clooney, a famous person, is what's given her that platform, that international.
But also, surely, Carol, this is the year of the Weinstein scandal, and because of that, it was relevant at an awards ceremony for the film industry.
Yes.
I mean, it really was.
Okay, yeah.
Now, I agree with you. If it goes on year after year, we'll all go to die of boredom.
To that point, here we are. No, exactly. Thank you. You've done this brilliantly for me, Greg. I take you back 40 years to the year when Paddy Chayefsky, an American screenwriter, and you'll appreciate more of his work a little bit later in this show, I warn you now, Paddy Chayefsky, screenwriter, at the Oscars of 1978.
I would like to say, personal opinion of course, that I'm sick and tired of people exploiting the occasion of the Academy Awards for the propagation of their own personal political propaganda.
Greg, that was 1978. That's how long that's been going on.
Well, it will come on. It will go on and on, won't they? And,
not if Carol has her way.
No, Carol's right. At some stage, someone's going to say, look,
enough.
It's too much of this.
But the average speech used to be 30 words. It's now something like 180, unless you're Gary Oldman. He dribbled on for 3
if people don't watch it and won't be part of it, then they'll change it.
But you mentioned Weinstein there. Isn't it funny that in the year that we know that Weinstein, the monster, has been exposed, the film, Piers Morgan said this, it made me laugh, the film that won the Best Picture was a film about a vile-looking monster. And this... falling in love with a mute woman. I mean, films that no one wants to watch. This is one of those worthy... Anyway,
I didn't think the monster was vile-looking in the shape of water.
But it will never be too much. For all the women who have been harassed, for all the women who have been abused, for them... They are very happy that somebody is actually fighting their cause. So it's never going to be enough. We're never going to say
I think they've reduced politics. I think they've reduced politics to crying about all those poor women out there. This is a bunch of the richest, most privileged women in the world.
Politics.
They think Inequality is getting paid $15 million a movie when their male co-star gets $20 million. They don't know what inequality means. And that's the sort of stuff they stand there, you know, full of
self... I think they do, Carol. The women who had to sleep with casting directors
there's another thing.
Allegedly, heads of studios in order to... Otherwise, they didn't get the gig.
Here's an interesting point. And you might scoff at it. Harvey Weinstein's lawyer is a guy called Ben Bratman. Now, you know, Weinstein's a sleazeball, we know that, but he voiced what I think is quite an uncomfortable truth this week, and he said that
was his truth.
I think it's an uncomfortable. I think it is a truth. He says, beautiful young women in Hollywood and everywhere else wield the most enormous power. And he said that women's campaign groups don't acknowledge this. They only see victim and predator. And he says, you know, if a woman decides to sleep with a Hollywood producer to advance her career, what she has done is made a decision.
Okay.
Can I
make one point?
And then I'd like to add to your point.
Just to add to that, which is, a woman obviously has agency and can decide what she wants to do, but I think that we have to... I think what's come out of the whole Me Too movement is if the man has power in that relationship, then it is not necessarily consensual in a way that we should approve.
But the woman has power with her beauty and her youth.
No, but let me finish. But also, while we are living under a system of patriarchy, the problem is that that woman's youth and beauty that you're talking about is often exploited and abused. So I wouldn't say that the woman has power because
would you admit
that?
I would women say that often exploit their youth and beauty?
We live in a society that for centuries has only valued that
women's
in
currency.
Would you admit
and now that's about to change.
Would you admit that women exploit their youth and beauty?
I don't think you can look at it in those terms.
Would you like to join in on this?
No,
I didn't think so. I thought you would not say a lot.
I mean, you've just proved my point. The female currency for too long has been their youth, beauty, attractiveness, and I don't want to use a word on air, but nubile. You know, they are of childbearing age, and you know what I'm saying.
Many women would use that to their advantage. Don't deny that women flirt, Rachel, that women fluff men's egos, because they do it all the time.
We're not denying that, but we're saying you've got to look at why, and that's what needs to
get what they want.
Anyway, can we move on to my topic, please? The Me Too movement has quite rightly called times up on sexual harassment. Established institutions have been called out for their lack of equal pay. And the underrepresentation of women is finally being acknowledged in politics and business. But does this mean feminism has won? Unlikely. If the election of Trump and the EU referendum tells us anything, it's that you cannot assume an argument is won just because the opposing view has become marginalised. In both these cases, we assumed victory and stopped listening to the misgivings on the other side. Failure to engage the quiet minority or majority just leads to temporary victory until someone comes along who is able to articulate the way they are thinking. To stop this happening here, it's time for women of the world to unite with like-minded men. The path towards gender equality is something that can only be achieved together. Failure to include men in the discussion will not create long-term sustainable change. So forget the battle of the sexes. It's time for collaboration of the sexes.
I was jotting a little bit of that down, June. Failure to include men. In what way? Spell that out. Give me the details of that failure.
Yes, and I'll be honest, I just did it to you and Greg a minute ago there. Example with Me Too and Time's Up. I think what's happened is that there are a lot of good men, the majority of good men out there, who feel that they would want to contribute to this conversation, but they're too scared of being shouted down, and they're too scared to even attempt to engage in the debate. And I think it's really important. Sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for Greg, but I wasn't too scared, but how can I possibly identify with, to use your word, a nubile, attractive young woman who's been preyed on by a man in a position of power? I can't...
No, but what...
Because that's what you three were going at, and I think probably that's why Greg and I kept a respectful silence, because you've experienced it, we don't.
No, but what you can do and what we can do is actually engage in a discussion and include you about what the new terms should be.
And do you think... When I say you, I don't mean you personally, but you think your cause has failed to do that?
Yeah, for sure.
So why? Does the onus not possibly lie with you folk?
It lies with both. It lies in creating a platform and a safe space where you feel comfortable enough to actually contribute to the conversation. And I think at the moment the conversation is very one-sided. What do you think, Rachel?
I think that it's really important not to shut men down when they have something to say, because, you know, there's so much evidence that shows that men are reluctant to identify as feminists.
Yes.
And actually, Sky did a poll yesterday which showed, I thought, an astonishing number of both men and women who thought that feminism has gone too far.
And actually, all 40%. What does too far mean?
Well, I don't know what too far means, but it's like... There's so much evidence showing, well, you know, when there are 30% of women across the board in public life, people think basically too many.
Yes.
Too many, because you see, when women went to Oxford, somebody said the monstrous regiment of women. There were about sort of 7% of women at Oxford. Anyway, so that's what I mean.
I mean, I've always regarded myself as a feminist.
Good.
Always.
Are you a feminist?
I've disproportionately, over the years, promoted women.
Yeah.
Do you think that men and women are equal?
And I've done it not because of a political thing,
Ben,
but because...
say it, I'm a feminist.
Well, I think men and women are equal, yes. Does that mean I'm a feminist? Is that the pure definition of feminism?
Pure definition.
Then I'm a feminist.
OK, but then why... Then I'll bring you back...
Will you campaign... Will you take action so that the inequalities are changed?
I mean, I'm no longer in a position that I hire people, but I can honestly tell you all the time I was hiring people for newspapers.
You are one of the most prominent voices on your station, so you actually
can
influence.
Do you mind? I'd like to say
you are the most, sorry.
Yeah.
So you can use your platform.
Yeah,
you can use
your platform to say women should be paid equally.
No, I can't say
given
that.
equal opportunity.
No,
they should have equal opportunities.
Because we pay on ability.
But you could but you could use your platform to say to your bosses that they should have more women as
if they're up to the job, yes.
Precisely.
And
women
should.
But it's a different industry.
And women shouldn't have to do all the caring work while men run
Let me just say, when I came in... say it's if they're up to the job. That's an interesting question.
Yes.
Do you apply the same criteria to men?
To men?
Yes.
And
you don't think that disproportionately men are likely to get the job rather than the women just because they're men?
I mean, it's unfair because the boss is the radio, but if you look at the newsroom, all the reporters bar one is a woman. Yeah. So certainly I would suggest that perhaps the situation is changing. Most of the reporter voices are women.
Carol, can I let you come?
It's strangely quiet, Carol, isn't she?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Let's get used to this.
I came into reception this morning, interesting, a bunch of 10 people came in through a door, mixed group of men and women, and they all shouted, Happy International Women's Day,
How
everyone, which I thought was odd. But yeah, good. But if you want to go, but let's go back to Hollywood a little bit, and you talk about men and women have to join together. The men in Hollywood sat back 4 years and did nothing while the women were being abused.
I know, but wait,
they did nothing.
But what happened to Matt Damon when he pointed out, I thought correctly, that a woman being patted on the butt was not the same. It wasn't the same category of abuse as a woman who had been raped. And I happen to agree with Matt Damon. But what happened was he was shut down to leave Twitter. You know, terrible mea culpa.
He was shouted down because at that point this campaign had gained this kind of momentum. And had he said it last year, it probably wouldn't have mattered that much. But you know, the men in Hollywood, you know, and it really made me cross when very prominent men, and I've been told I can't say their names again, spoke out when this was happening and said, well, I didn't know this was going on. Were they walking around blindfold the whole time?
They all knew.
But in the case of that, it was men and women.
So they were either
people that
seeing it happening and doing nothing, or they were complicit in it.
Anyway, can we have a look at Emma Watson for He for She? I love this campaign, and I think this is what we need more of. We've got that clip.
We want to end gender inequality. And to do this, we need everyone involved. This is the first campaign of its kind at the UN. We want to try and galvanise as many men and boys as possible to be advocates for change.
I love this campaign, and I think actually this has got to be what Me Too and Time's Up moves on to.
I was in Uganda for International Women's Day about 3 years ago.
What the hell were you doing in Uganda for International Women's Day?
I wasn't there.
Oh, God, you've had some freebies in your life. That's a belter.
Let me finish. I actually was paying. But what was interesting was a group of women, obviously very poor, who had just made some money for the first time in their lives. And we said, well, what are you going to do with it? And one woman said,
spend it on the
for the first time ever, I've bought myself a new dress. For international, so I can wear it on International Women's
Me Too, He Too, whatever it's called. I think it's really important to get to the the young boys early. The consent classes across Africa, especially in Kenya, have been incredibly successful in reducing the rate of rape as well in the country.
But I mean, but if you go to a place like Uganda, I mean, the difference between what most men do and what most women do is massive, and women disproportionately do the work. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And yet the men disproportionately play cards and drink.
But those are cultural things that I think are... Well, I think what I'm talking about is also a Western conversation. I think you've got to look at the pace of things. So in terms of how far we move where developing countries are concerned, it's different to what we can do here. I think we can actually move far
But do you agree that there's a kind of feminism...
Just because women are more emancipated in the
Do you agree that there's a kind of feminism in this country that sometimes and oftentimes alienates men? I think there is.
I do, and that's that's the whole point of this discussion. I really think we have to make sure we include men in the conversation.
But you can't if they feel excluded just by
but that's
the way
why women like us
feminist
have to make sure that we are creating an open forum for that. Now, can I show you this? I have to say, I was so confused by this. So this is a new beer. I don't drink, but I mean, you all do, so maybe you'll like it. By Brewdog, and they created a pink IPA. And they're saying that they were trying to be sarcastic, but to me, like, sort of pointless. What's the purpose of that?
Well, let me say what Brewdog are saying. Sarah Warman, I stress that, for it is a woman. Global
That's
head...
men trying to get in the conversations.
Global head of marketing at Brewdog says, pink IPA is clearly an over-the-top ridiculing of the types of sexist marketing we often see. We always anticipated that some people might not immediately appreciate the irony of pink IPA, but that did not deter us in our mission to spark a conversation about the gender pay.
But why didn't they do a
Hang on, I didn't make the beer, I'm only reading it out.
Presumably, it's like buying a pink Lady Bic. You know, is it going to be much more expensive than the male Brewdog beer?
You don't have a problem with a pink shaver, do you?
I do.
Of course I do.
Why?
You can't hold a pen or shave
more.
unless it's pink.
Well,
I don't quite get that.
It's one of the greatest crimes of society.
I don't
You get a
understand.
pink shaver.
No, basic women's products, if they're marketed to women, they can put up a sort of 10 to 20% markup on it. They just put it in pink.
Well, don't
of course
buy
it
them.
is.
We'll just buy the blokes' ones.
That's what I do, thank you.
Well, that would seem to solve all the
Thanks for the
problem.
tip.
Exactly.
Have you got one under there?
No, I haven't. No, I've got, you'll see in a minute what I've got under here, Karen, don't you worry, because I'm up next. And despite government advice, I want to be able to take my cake and eat it. To blatantly borrow, now let's make that steal, from the legendary movie of over 40 years ago that was Network, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. This week I was told what size my lasagna ready meal should be and lectured not to save money on buy one, get one free deals. This same bunch of hectoring gnolls, otherwise known as Public Health England, have also in the past told me I need to be careful on icy paths as I could slip, to eat a prescribed number of fruit or veg, and, something I'd never have figured out, to open a window if I get hot in the summer. You and I pay £3.9 billion a year to 5,000 full-time staff to produce this asinine drivel. As a result of this nannying nonsense, we've bred a generation who faint at the first sign of snow. So, I'm asking you to get your ample backside off your chairs and yell, I'm not going to take this anymore!
You have every right to tell me to bog off. And that was a very good performance.
Oh, thank you very much.
As Peter Fit, you're the new Peter Fitch on the pledge.
Can I tell you, by an incredible coincidence, Paddy Chayefsky, from whom we heard in the Oscar debate, he wrote Network.
Did he?
Yeah,
really?
it's a pure coincidence.
Wow.
Yeah. Rachel.
Actually, Public Health England, you'll be delighted to hear, actually gets 4.3 billion.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's gone up.
I'll get you angry.
It's gone up a bit like your weight.
Yeah.
No, Nick. I think the thing is here is it's really hard to tell people you love, and I love you, that they're overweight.
Right.
And so you sort of think...
Where's this going?
I mean, it's really hard to turn to your husband, for example, and say, darling, when we married, you know, you were 12 stone, now you're 15 stone, you're a tub of lard.
Right.
You know,
What's
go
that to do with
get
Public
to the
Health England?
Yeah.
Because Public Health England takes the place. Now we're all so weasel-worded and we're so snowflakey, we're so terrified of using words like fat or fat-shaming. Actually, you need the government to set the tone.
But they're not setting the tone. The thing about Public Health England is it's failing miserably. People are, you know, when you have a society that you tell doctors not to tell people they're fat in case you embarrass them or you hurt them, you know, we have to get tough if we're going to tackle.
That's what I said.
But
Doctors and parents aren't doing the job, so we need...
Yes, I'm saying individuals, and Public Health England gets all this money, and they are failing miserably because the population's getting fatter by the second.
Let me ask you a question. Nick. Do you accept that we have a problem in this country with, particularly amongst kids, with obesity?
Of course.
Yes, of course.
Of course.
What would you do about it then?
Absolutely mandate school gym class, PE classes, physical exercise, and try. I don't know where we'll get them from, but try and get school fields and school playing fields back, and get kiddies to exercise.
No. But then, what do you do with the adults? Because what you're talking about is for children, next generation. I totally agree. But what do we do with the adults who?
Do you really want to know what you do? Well, you're not going to like this, but I think I've said this before. Obese people who present themselves to the NHS, they get their first treatment free, and then if you don't go on a course and lose some weight, you start paying towards your treatment.
I think there's... And also,
we did ask.
And I think also there's no point in asking the food industry to cut down the amount of fat and salt and
Why
sugar.
not? It's going to save £4.5 billion.
Hang on a second. You haven't let me finish my sentence. The whole point, don't ask them, force them to. Make them cut down. Because there's no point in letting them make killer foods and then tax us on it. There's no point in that, because lots of people don't want to be educated on food. You know, if we're going to produce food, produce it with less killer stuff.
But surely the role of a government is to try and keep its citizens as healthy as possible.
But they're not doing it.
No, let me finish. So what is the problem with them educating and advising? At the end of the day, nobody has to do what they're saying. It's a suggestion.
Nick,
and I think they have been successful.
I think
Five a day, for sure.
In a way, I sort of agree with Nick. There's a distinction between... I think the primary role of government is to keep its citizens safe, not healthy. But when there is incontrovertible evidence that the nation is in the grip of binge eating and binge drinking, I think the government has to do something. 45% increase in alcohol-related deaths for the over 50s.
Wow.
Okay.
That is a lot.
Greg, you asked me, do I agree? And I did. We have got obese children. Where were you going with that point?
Because I think they're trying to... I mean, look at this clip from the chief nutritionist at Public Health England.
We are very used to, as a nation, consuming much more than we need. We're worried about telling people what to do too much. People, they need freedom of choice, but actually our choices are costing the NHS a lot of money.
I mean, I'm a bit like you. I basically think the government should keep out of most things.
Yes.
I think, though, if you identify a massive national problem that is emerging and is getting worse, government has a responsibility to say, can we do something about this?
What my fellow pledges have all done so brilliantly is you focused on obese children, which is quite right. OK, fine. But telling people to open the window if they get hot.
And wear sturdy shoes.
Or today's very newspaper today, the Sun newspaper today, Public Health England, here we go again, urging people not to have birthday cake with their work colleagues, instead to make a cake of cucumber, celery and, I think, tomatoes. What a load of cakey cobblers.
Let's ask you.
Really?
You used to be quite a lot bigger than
I did, 40, just under 50 pounds.
You decided to lose all that.
I did.
Now, a lot of people would like to do that, but don't do it and can't do it.
Well, they can.
They can. Yes, they can.
Well, all right, they find it, they're unable to.
It's down
No, they're not unable to do it, they're unwilling to.
I spat that muffin out because I can't. I've got my mind. Yeah, because I'm in that mindset now. But go on,
isn't it a bit more than that? Isn't it about the sort of food that we now eat compared to the food that was eaten 30 years ago?
It's full of sugar and syrup.
Sugar
and actually, in the case of the cake and offices, I mean, we can laugh at that, but it is serious because at the end of the day, how many days sick do people have off each year because of their unhealthy choices?
More than
so why wouldn't an employer want to actually give their employees different options?
Have the employees what you just want to do. You want to promote your business.
You can have a vegan cake. You can have a cake. You can have a cake without sugar. There's lots of ways you can still enjoy yourself in a healthy way.
If you can see,
I would want to be told.
If you can see you're sitting on this time bomb that's getting worse, and that there's a whole generation of kids going to come through who are going to get worse. Well, isn't it the responsibility of government to try to do something?
100%.
But the policy is
looking away from opening the windows in the summer.
No, you're taking this.
Hang
on a minute. You're taking the sunlight on.
Yeah.
I mean, the sun spends its life picking. Yes, but the sun spends its life doing that. That's irrelevant. There is a real issue of obesity amongst kids.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, we know that.
And obesity in a society.
Carol, icy roads, you get involved in it. Don't wear slippy shoes on icy roads.
Yes, all that. But, I mean, I just want to go back to this. The policy on obesity is inconsistent. If they had a consistent policy, it might work. You can't... We can't tell people they're fat. We keep telling fat people that it's an addiction, a disease. It is not. It's a self-inflicted... It is not an addiction, June. It's people who just... You've never been fat in your life. We've both been fat. Are still fat.
It's a bit of both.
Know what it's about.
No, you know.
Addiction in the sense that you don't want to stop, but you can stop, and we all know what you do to lose weight. And the government can't ever. The government cannot make us stop eating, and that's a fact. You have to make a decision yourself to change the way you eat, or you're going to be fat all your life. But
Rachel, you've been surprisingly quiet. You said a degree of support. What else do you want to add to this? Do you agree with Carol that most people should be able to dress themselves without being hectored by Public Health England?
Well, I think it's a pure matter of health coming together with us unable as a country to afford the obesity crisis that's coming, that's not with us and actually is getting worse. If 1 in 5 kids go to primary school obese and 1 in 3 leaves primary school obese, it's a serious problem. Okay. You're talking about the whole nanny state issue.
It's absurd. What about the trains have been going through a part of South East London I've used for over 150 years. This icy break, don't stand near the edge of the platform. You could slip. Where the hell did you wear a vest when you go out?
When we had the cold snap, they actually said you've got to think about what you've got to stock up on.
Oh,
We're not telling anybody anything that's bad for them. So how is this a problem?
Nanny stating.
OK, well, it's me up after the break. And guess what? It's time for my favourite topic again. When I was a kid living in West London, my mum's big dream was to win the football pools and buy houses for all my aunts and uncles. She couldn't have imagined that 50-odd years later, just owning a house in the southeast gives you a good chance of ending up a millionaire. New research by Sky News shows that just over a fifth of households in London are now worth more than £1 million. But the same proportion of people living in the capital are amongst the poorest in the country. This growing inequality largely stems from the fact that some, mainly older people, own their own homes, while others spend huge sums on rent. Theresa May expressed her concern about it this week. But what should she or can she do about it? I think we should probably increase inheritance tax and consider making people pay capital gains tax on the money they make on their house when they sell it. Now, this won't be popular, but if we want to tackle inequality, the time's come for tough choices.
I mean, I think there was a part in your intro there where it sounded like an attack on baby boomers. People like me and like you, I guess, you know, and we're constantly being told we're selfish and wrecking the lives of others, because what we did was we worked hard, we saved, we bought a house. And somehow it's now our fault that millennials can't have a house and that we should now be punished for having our houses. And I don't believe that is the case. I mean, we had a discussion here last week where we're talking about Damon Green talking about putting 2p on the national insurance for
over 40s.
For over 40s, which would, you know, nearly count the baby boomers, to pay for social care. Now, that I totally agree with, but Dave Willits, who was the boss of the Resolution Foundation, he is suggesting 15p on our tax to pay to help millennials get onto the housing ladder and have the things that we already have, which is outrageous.
I've got a clip of David Willits, so should we see what he actually said?
We're all familiar with wealth inequalities between rich and poor, between men and women, but there's another very important inequality now between people based essentially on their age, because if you got into the housing market early on, before the massive booms in house prices of the last 30 years, then you're sitting on massive capital gains, but it's harder for the next generation to do the same.
And just on a slight point of clarification, Carol, what David Willits is actually saying, a 15p would need to be put on tax for the millennials unless we take action now, just to stress that point.
I mean, I get that, but that also plays to my point. Why should people who have done nothing other than work hard, save hard and bought a house, why should they be punished now for having that? Why should their old age be thrown into turmoil because the people at the other end...
No, I'm not suggesting that you throw their old age into turmoil at all.
He's suggesting wouldn't do that.
All I'm saying is people have made significant sums out of their houses, beyond their wildest dreams. You know, something that used to cost 50,000 now sells for $750,000. Is it so wrong to say, well, when you die, you have to pay inheritance tax on that, or when you sell it, then maybe you've got to pay some tax? Now, I can accept that it's incredibly difficult, but
that's for your kids.
Well, no. The real discussion is: do we think the growing inequality between rich and poor is a problem? If you don't think it's a problem, then you should knock me to pieces. And so, but it's interesting that even the Conservative government
realise it's dangerous.
Thinks it's a
problem.
problem.
When Theresa May tried to deal with intergenerational unfairness. During the election campaign, you know, she lost the majority because people are very protective of what they have, and I think
and the people
quite legitimately. But I think that what we have more than anything else, is a problem with the wildly inflationary state of the housing market.
In parts of the country.
So may I make a suggestion on it?
OK, let's see what Theresa May has to say about housing.
If you look at wealth inequality, what we do see is that those people who've been able to get on the property ladder in the past have seen their properties rise in value, they've been accumulating that asset, and then we've got those people who just don't feel that they're going to be able to share in that in the future.
And I kind of get that, but I don't believe that when you die and you leave a sum of money, I don't believe it should all be taken from you. When you have worked all of your life... But he's saying that the inheritance tax should be more.
Actually, this government's plan is to reduce inheritance tax over the next 3 years.
By raising the threshold.
I can't see any justification for that. Most of the people who've made money out of their houses have never paid tax on that money at all.
No, they haven't. But Greg, they don't have any money until they sell the house and they're dead by the time they sell the house, which is when their kids get the money. But
are their kids? So the question is, are their kids entitled to the money, or should society that is a massive capital gain that they never expected?
Greg, can I say,
Nearly, Nick.
Do you think that some of this might actually be resolved if Brexit happens? Because, no, let me finish. This is where I'm actually on your side.
Oh, right, OK. Oh, great.
In the sense that the top end of the market will fall out, and particularly in places like London, and surely that will have an impact on the rest of the market.
I wonder if I could have my say, because in a previous conversation I mentioned the movie Network.
OK.
In this
With
conversation,
what's your man called? Peter
Chavinsky, yes. Now, in this conversation, it's clearly Groundhog Day, because yet again, Greg Dyke had an extraordinary largesse that he's earned, I grant him, that he has. He wants the other people out there on Struggle Street who are working their off, who have paid taxes all their lives, who paid tax when they bought,
he's talking about
all
not
the
on Struggle
taxes,
Street.
and then they want to give the money to their children. So if you'd like to sign that cheque for the second opportunity...
Actually, I sent a very large cheque to HM Revenue and Customs only yesterday, so it was quite a bit more than that. So, but thanks for helping me to do that.
But they paid all their lives.
No, my point is, they bought houses when they were young. By complete chance, these houses are now worth a fortune.
At interest rates of 17%.
Yes. No baby boomer denies that they bought a house for twopence halfpenny and now it's worth 2 million or whatever it is. So this is my thought. I think that the stamp duty imposts of George Osborne meant that what we've got is a blocked housing market. The high values of the housing stock are locked in by the fact that people aren't moving. So what we need to do is unblock the housing market. Rather than by tax the baby boomer generation to help the millennials up it, we've got to get the baby boomers down the housing ladder, which means cutting stamp duty. Let's say over 60s.
And ride a coach and horses through planning regulations.
Absolutely.
Get them building
that will
houses.
release a huge amount of housing
To be fair,
stock.
the government are trying to do that. It'll be interesting to see if it works. But they are trying to get a lot more houses built quickly.
Pretty lame stuff.
But I mean, we shouldn't pretend that this is a problem everywhere. This is certain parts of the country, but particularly the southeast, where people have made vast sums of money that they didn't...
just punish everyone here, then. That's not fair.
But they didn't work for it.
No, but that's also...
This isn't money they worked for. They bought a house when they were...
But Greg, but that's also because of the influx of wealthy people that we had move into these cities and these parts of the country. I think Brexit might change that. I think let's wait and see. If Brexit actually happens, I think a lot of this stuff will...
So you're thinking that house prices will crash because of Brexit?
I'm not going to sell a house because of Brexit. This comes as a bit of a shock. How did that happen?
Even I, who's a pretty strong Remainer, even I can't see that happening.
But you just said that people didn't earn the money that they've got in their houses. No, but when all of us, I'm sure, were young and we were paying our mortgages, it was hard to pay the mortgages. Sure. And I remember... interest rates of 15–17%. It was more than half of my salary. So we didn't get that. You say we haven't earned it. We worked to keep the house.
But the sort of job you had, or the sort of job I had at 30, wouldn't buy you. You couldn't get a big enough mortgage to buy a house today. And without your mum or your dad giving you a chunk, you can't save it.
No government has yet dared tax us on the appreciation of our assets.
No. Well, they do on all other assets.
Not even council tax.
No, they do.
And nor should they. You know, the thing is, a lot of people bought property because Gordon Brown messed up the pensions, and so people went into property
it's just fueled by
to
jealousy.
make that...
It's not jealousy. If you don't think it's an issue, If you don't think that
not the
actually
point.
a growing inequality is an issue, that's fine.
It is an
If you
issue.
do think it's an issue, you've got to try to work out what do you do about it.
And for a stable society, it is an issue.
In a
but-
sentence, supply and demand, build more houses. She didn't go far enough last week, or this week.
Anyway, so it's my turn for the straight talker of the week. And we've decided to go one better for the end of this episode. In the spirit of International Women's Day, we are honouring all the women that have been telling it like it is for a lot longer than just a week.
Mary's insistence on short skirts amazed many buyers until they reflected that girls in Milan and Minneapolis are now demanding what Britain already has.
The ladies not for turning.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? I travel the world and the seven seas.
Girl power, woman power, just empowering women.
This is an unprecedented incident. In my 29 years of being a firefighter, I have never, ever seen anything of this scale.
Some of them men think they freak this like we do.
We're fed up with not being treated the same, not getting the same amount of pay, just having to do 2 jobs at the same time. It's enough. Time's up.
Yay! And that was from Sky News' 100 Women programme. Isn't it fabulous? Fantastic. Are you inspired?
Not often you see Margaret Thatcher and the Spice Girls in the same series of video clips, really. It's the
Whether
great unknown Spice.
Whether you like Maggie or not, you
I did.
cannot deny she was a
Absolutely.
phenomenally strong woman.
She inspired them. Don't
I
you remember
agree.
when they said they were
She
Tories?
didn't promote a lot of women, though, did
No,
she?
she didn't at all.
I mean, she
And the
was the
Queen-
only woman in the cabinet for a long time.
For a long time.
Madge.
Well, then it falls to perhaps women should be doing more, as you were saying. In
For
your,
other women.
women need to be
for women.
sisters doing it
Women for
themselves, or
women,
whatever
yeah.
that song was.
Men and women for women, I say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you've been watching The Pledge on Sky News. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter to join in the debate.